Okay, I'm just going to test our audio to make sure we are good. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Okay, geweldig. Zot de heilige Gemara right at the top of Chav Gimel Amud Aleph. Itmar. Kaimetz de Minchas Chayte. Kaimetz de Minchas Chayte Sheshamlai. You took the kaimetz of a Minchas Chayte, which was not supposed to have any oil, and you oiled it before you put it onto the Mizbeach. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan says it's possible. It's supposed to be chorev. It's not supposed to have oil. V'Rish Lakish Amar Hu Asmai Mishach Shechai B'Shiyarei Halai Gumaleu. That's how lechatchila you're supposed to put the kmitza, even of a minchas chorev, on the mizbeach by first oiling it up, either by rolling it around in a keli of a different mincha, so there's oil residue. And the Brisker Rav explains that's done because it'll hold the kaimetz together better. Fact Gemara, I v'oksiv lo yosem elo shemen v'lo yitin alel avoyna. Zok Gemara in Chanami. But that's a who shaloi yikva lo shemen kechaver seah. That's just telling you that in the making of the mincha, you shouldn't mix it with shemen, but avoided to process the kaimetz and to make it easier to put on the mizbeach as one piece, it should be smeared with oil. I'm going to prove to you that it's possible. Because a Brisa quotes as follows. What if you mixed up, it was mixed a mincha that's a dry mincha with a mincha that's a mincha that has oil with it. Yakriv, you should be makriv it. That's what the Mishnah said. Rabbi Yehuda lo yakriv. And Rabbi Yehuda said you shouldn't be makriv it. Now Rashi explains, the reason why you makriv it is because the two kmitzos will not be mevatel each other. And wherever the oil is would belong to the minchas nedava. But if there was shemen on the kmitza of the minchas chayta itself, that surely would be possible. So you have a raya against Rish Lakish. Zok Gemara, my love, the minchas chayta, the Arab, the minchas nedava, which would be a shverkeit on Rish Lakish. So Gemara, it's minchas porim ve'elim b'minchas kvasim. Now they both have oil, but one has a lot more oil than the other. So therefore, there's a concern that one's going to become more diluted than it's supposed to, and vice versa. And that's why it's a shaila of bittul. For Gemara, katani law. How could you say that when the Brisa says chorif sh'nisar v'bol, it's referring to a case of porim ve'elim that got mixed up with the minchas kvasim? That's listed in the same Brisa as a separate case. Minchas porim ve'elim and minchas kvasim v'chorev sh'nisar v'bol yikarev Rabbi Yehuda lo yikarev. So clearly, it's a standalone case, which is likely the case where Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish are arguing, and you have a raya that it would be possible. The details of minchas porim ve'elim and minchas kvasim is merely explaining, clarifying what the Brisa meant when it said charev sh'nisar v'bol. Be'rov, kaimetz shemitza shmonoi al gabe etzim ma'u. You took a kaimetz. Now the kaimetz consists of flour and oil, and you squeeze the oil out on the etzim. So now the oil is somewhat separated from the kaimetz. But when you put the kaimetz on the mizbech, you put it on that puddle of oil right on top of the etzim. So now they're once again combined. Now what's the shayla? Chibure oilin ka'oilin damu. Do you say since they're touching, they're one on top of the other, it's considered like it's one, and therefore the kaimetz was huktar kilcha. So, I love kohen dami. Or no, we say it's separated out, and therefore it would not be a kosher aktar. Amalei Rabbeinu Rashi, lav hainu Rabbi Yochanan v'Reish Lakish. Doesn't this case match a similar case where we have a machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? The itmar hamayla ever she'ein b'kazayis. The answer mishlim the kazayis. We know if someone is marked there an aver on a bama, he's mechuyev curse because of shchutei chutz. Well, what if it wasn't a kazayis? The aver that he placed on the mizbech b'chutz did not have a kazayis, but there is a bone in the aver, and if you add the content to the bone to the aver, you'll have a kazayis. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv and Reish Lakish Amar Potter. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayiv, the obvious, most simplest understanding of Rabbi Yochanan is it's Chayiv because he holds chiburei olim ka'olim damu. He holds that the bone is not what you have to be marked here, but we consider it one and the same because it's connected to what you're being marked here. By the same token, the oil and the flour should be as one, and it should be a kosher aktar. Reish Lakish Amar Potter because chiburei olim lav ka'olim dami. Zok the Gemara, you don't have a raya from there to our shaila. It's really an independent shaila. The shaila that we asked here would be appropriate to ask Sai according to Rabbi Yochanan and Sai according to Reish Lakish. Why did Rabbi Yochanan say that the meat and the bone are mitzaref? Like we said yesterday, the bone and the meat, they grow together. It's one item. That's what you can argue combines into one. But two separate items, oil and flour. The lav mina, the kohen soup, the oil and the flour are two different things. And maybe they won't combine if they're not actually mixed together. Or the mafilo Reish Lakish, who holds that the meat does not combine with the bone. The bar mifreshu v'parish lav mitzvah lahadure. First of all, you could take the bone out, you don't even have to put it on the mizbeach. And even if it fell off the mizbeach, you wouldn't put it back. So it's very much disconnected from the meat. Avol shemen, the lav bar mifreshu, you're not supposed to take the oil out of the flour when you make the mincha. And if you did, you got to put it back in because we need the whole kohen as a whole to be hukav. What? Or maybe it doesn't make a difference. Teku. Gemara blibes with a suffix. We don't know if you took a mincha, the komitz, and you squeeze the oil out, and then you put the komitz on top of the oil, would that be a good aktar as a komitz or not? So, the Mishnah Vayter. Now we're getting back into a sugya that's not so easy anymore. We're getting back to heavy-duty menachos. Shnei menachos, shalom nikmetzu. You had two menachos that the komitz was not taken from them yet. The Gemara is going to refer to this as tevel, because it's the mincha, the komitz, and the shirayim mixed together. You have not yet taken out the shirayim. And they're mixed together, but they're not totally mixed together. There are parts that you could detect with clarity that are from mincha A, and there are parts that you can detect with clarity that are from mincha B. So if there's enough of mincha from A and from B that you can be sure is from A and from B, that you can make a kmitza from that area, ksherais, because you're still able to take a proper kmitza, defined from mincha A and defined from mincha B. I'm sorry? We'll see the Gemara. V'imlav pisules. But if you couldn't, then it's possible because you cannot possibly be sure that you're going to be taking the proper komitz. What about komitz shenis arev b'mincha shalom nikmitza? So you took the kmitza from mincha A, and it was mixed into the same container, the same kloshois as a mincha that had not yet had its kmitza taken off. So the halach is, don't be mocked to this whole thing, because you only have one komitz in there, not the other. Vim hikter, if you were mocked to it, zu shenikmitza oil labailim. The mincha that its kmitza is in this container will be a kosher mincha. Because the whole mincha was put on the mizbech, a mincha wasn't taken, komitz wasn't taken from it. What about this Arav Koimsa b'shiyareh? What happens if you took the kmitza out and then it got mixed into its own shirayim? Or b'shiyareh shachaveri. Or it got mixed into the shirayim of a different mincha. Lo yakter, you shouldn't be makter it. Hikter oila l'baylim. If he's makter it, it is oila l'baylim. For the last 2 days, we've been learning about you. We've been learning about salting. That's all we've been learning about. So it's Mamash Your Gemara.
Just didn't have a shortage.
Right. The Gemara even discusses, if you couldn't find melech sadomis, you could use the other type of melech. That's right. Okay, gewaltig. So let's just peek at Rashi. Now the Rashi on this Mishnah of Gimel is actually on the Mishnah on Chav Beis Amud Aleph. So I'm just going to go back to Chav Beis Amud Aleph to learn Rashi. Lo yaktir, I'm sorry, im yochel lekama likmoit b'zubit ne'atzma shenof l'zubit tzadzu, the two menachos are side by side, but v'nishur mizukidei kometz shelonis arev, then it's ksheros. We know there's some parts of A and B that are defined that you can take the kmitz from there. From Rav Psulos, Tamrina b'toros kahanim misalta v'loi misadas chaverta. Of course, we have to have the kmitzas to be pure from A for A and pure from B for B. If it got mixed in, if the komitz of mincha A got mixed in with the entire mincha B, you shouldn't be marked or anything. Afilu kol ha'merovas, you can't be marked or everything. Deinak Torah mitzvah ela b'komitz. The only thing that you're supposed to place on the mizbech is the komitz. Umekamitz nami lo notzi komitz. You cannot take another kmitza because the dilma b'chol komitz v'komitz yesh mizeh shenizarev b'leka komitz shalom from the second mincha. So therefore you cannot take another kmitza because the next kmitza you take might have some content of kmitza A. So you're stuck. But the hikter, if you mark through everything, at least it would be oila for the kmitza that was there. The hikter kol ha'mureves also labayim, the one that the kmitza wasn't taken from, tala nikmitza ven minchas nadava niteres b'lei kmitza. You have to do a kmitza for a minchas nadava for it to be kosher. What about if it was nisar of kunza b'shireh? Lo yakter eskula, you're not allowed to makter everything. Mishum d'shirayim asfirim lahakter. We have a project that we're going to run into again today. But it's also to be makter shirayim on the mizbeach. Tichsiv lo shaktiru mimenu isha l'Hashem. It says v'chol sahor v'chol davash lo shaktiru mimenu isha l'Hashem. And we dash in lo shaktiru mimenu isha l'Hashem is not referring to sahor and davash. It's referring to if you were already makter from it, and now we are talking about shirayim, don't be makter again. If you already placed some on the fire, meaning you already makter its komitz, hareyu beval taktiru, you're not allowed to be makter the shirayim on the mizbech. Okay, valtik. Tanan we learned. I'm sorry, I have to go back to Gimel Umarav. Amar Chisda. Here's where it gets complicated. Nevela betela v'shchuta. What if I had 2 pieces of shachut and one of nevela? I have 2 pieces of meat that are shachut and one of nevela. So the loch is the nevela is bottled in the shachut. L'may nafkamina. A, you're allowed to eat it, and B, it's all toher, as Rashi says. Yesh im yesh tei chatichos of shchutos v'achas nevela. Ve'en yadua ezahi, I don't know which is which, but lebehem, and therefore shem naga ba'achas achatichos enai tamei damrinan shchutahi. If you touch any one of these pieces, you will not become tamei, as if you touched a nevela, because we go basar the brayv. It's bottle brayv. You could eat, yeah, sure you can eat, but you're not supposed to eat all 3 together. You can eat all 3, sure. Sure, if a tray of hot dog got mixed into a pot of homcha hot dogs, sure, I'll eat them all.
I know, it's a 3, it's a third, right? Doesn't matter.
It's batal brave. Now you're asking me, what about the tam? But here there's no problem of tam. They weren't cooked together. They just mixed. They're just three pieces. Why? The reason why it's called min b'she'enei minai and it's not batal is she'i efsher l'schuta sheteyasa nevela. It's impossible for a basar that's shechted to ever become nevela. But once it's shechted, it can never become nevela. So it's different and distinct from what is mixed into it. And therefore it's min b'she'enei minai. U'schuta ena b'teina b'nevela. But if you had two pieces of nevela and one was basar shchuta, there it wouldn't be batal. Why don't you say the same thing? It's min b'she'enei minai. Because she'efsher nevela sheta'asa shchuta. A nevela could become shchuta, meaning a nevela can lose its status of nevela as basar tamei. Why? The l'chimizricha, once it becomes rotten and not royal achila, parcha tamasa, it will no longer have the status of nevela. That is what Reb Chisda said. So let's think this through. There's the davar habevatel, the roif, and there's the davar hanispatel, which is the miyut, right? We're going to use the terminology that the Gemara uses, which is mivatel and batil. So when you have one piece of shchuta, when you have one piece of nevela, they got mixed into two pieces of shchuta, the mivatel is the shchuta, the batil is the nevela. And the main thing is that the mivatel should not be able to become the batel. As long as the shchuta cannot become nevela, that makes it min b'she'enei minai. So the mivatel can never become like the batel. That is what Reb Chisda said. Reb Chanina had a different perspective. Reb Chanina amar kol she'ef sheloi liyos kamayu einei batel. If it could be like it, it's not batel. So if the thing that's, so in this case you have the two shchutos and the one nevela, if the nevela can become like the shchuta, it will not be batel. It will be batel. So it's exactly the opposite. So therefore, if you have one piece of nevela that got mixed into two basar shchuta, it will not be batel. Because the batel can become like the shchuta. But if you had two nevela and one shchuta, then the shchuta would not be batel because the shchuta could never become nevela. So that's the machlokes. Now, we just have to clarify one point. L'may nafkamina, if one piece of basar shchuta got mixed into two pieces of basar nevela, l'may nafkamina if it's batel or not. Even if it's not batel, you can't eat anything anyway, you don't know which is which. Zokt Rashi, the nafkamina is if you're allowed to let them become tamei. Now let's say it's truma. You're not allowed to be matame truma, right? You're not allowed to let truma become tamei. So what happens if you have these three pieces here? Can I now not worry and let a sheretz touch it? The answer is no. Because if the shchuta is not batel, then I can't let a sheretz touch it. But if the shchuta is batel, then I can even let a sheretz touch it. Because I don't need to worry anymore that I'm being matame kosher. Because it's already batel. So that is the machlokes. Okay, so I can just review. Do you look at whether, when you're determining if something is min b'minai or if it's min b'she'enei minai, do you look at whether the batil could become like the mavatel, which is like Rab Chanina, or do you look at whether the mavatel can become like the batil, which is like Rab Chisda? That is the machlokes. Fractic Ali b'deman. We have a very nice machlokes amarim Chisda and Chanina, but they have to hold like one of the Tanaim in our Mishnah. So Ali b'deman. If this machlokes is according to the Rabbanan, who hold that min b'minai is batel, so then it doesn't really matter. Dafka, if they're karbanos, like the dam of a carbon, are mevatli each other. Min b'minai batel. So what's the difference if it's min b'minai or min b'she'enei minai? It's going to be batel anyway. So the whole Machlekes Reb Chisda and Reb Chanina is a moot point if we hold like the Rabban. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it makes a big nafkamina because Rabbi Yehuda holds min b'sheina minoi. I'm sorry, min b'minoi is not bottle. So we need to make an assessment: is this min b'minoi or not? But according to Rabbi Yehuda, you have another problem. And now I have to change volume. The owner of the Mesifto's house decided that he needed extra money, so he made now an extra volume. Thank you, Shmuel, for the first chelik, and thank you for the second chelik. Okay. The Rabbi Yehuda on Chazim base. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't chazutza also. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't look at the Isser v'Heter properties of it. He judges it based on looks, right? The two domim of the seir and the par, they look alike. They smell alike, they taste alike, they're similar, it's their physical properties. So who cares if it's basar shchuta or basar nevela? That's min b'minoi. It's meat in meat. As Rashi says, what's the chazuz lazel? The kamino il, ein dam avatal dam. The afal gab, sheyev shirlo aliyah is kazeh. You go basar the chazuz. So the question is, v'idi min b'minoi. It's both min b'minoi. So we have a problem here. Who in the world is Reb Chisda and Reb Chanina arguing according to? Their machlekes is not relevant according to the Rabbanan, and their machlekes is not relevant according to Rabbi Yehuda. So who is their machlekes relevant for? Ela libud Reb Chia. It's according to Reb Chia's understanding of what Rabbi Yehuda said. Because Reb Chia didn't just quote Rabbi Yehuda saying, min b'minoi le'botel. No. There is a specific example of min b'minoi where Reb Chia says in Reb Yehuda's name that min b'minoi is not botel. The Tani Reb Chia nevela u'shchuta b'telois zu b'zu. Reb Chia learned in Reb Yehuda that nevelois and nevela and shchuta is b'telois zu b'zu. As Rashi says, Reb Chanina Reb Chisda Mivrishitayim Reb Chia. Who are they arguing according to? They're arguing in Reb Chia. Reb Chia, who said that in the Nevela and Shchuta, one is bottle in the other. The argument is the Shchuta bottle in the Nevela, like Reb Chanina says, or is the Nevela bottle in the Shchuta, like Reb Chisda says? And that was the Machlokes. Reb Chia, perfect Gemara, I jumped ahead of myself. I said Reb Chia and Reb Yehuda. First the Gemara says, no, it's going to go to Reb Chia. But fact, Reb Chia also has to take a position in the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. So Reb Chia ali b'deman. If Reb Chia is going according to the Rabbanan, once again, min b'minai is bottle anyway. So the whole machlokes is irrelevant. Ha'ami oiden hu delay mevatli adadi. Ha'min b'minai bottle. V'ali b'Rabbi Yehuda, it has nothing to do with shchuta and nevela. It has to do with the mitzias. Call min b'minai Rabbi Yehuda. Zot the Gemara la'olam ali b'Rabbi Yehuda. Really, Rabbi Chia holds the Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Chia is telling us, don't think that you have right pshat in Rabbi Yehuda that any min b'minai is le'batel. No, that has to be qualified. V'chi amar Rabbi Yehuda min b'minai le'batel. Hanimili heicha de'efshir le'lamahav kavasei. Even Rabbi Yehuda's halacha min b'minai le'batel is only if they could become alike. If they cannot be alike, batel, it will be batel anyway. I'm sorry? It has to be min b'minai, not just physically, but it has to be min b'minai that the thing that you're mevatel, well, depending on your perspective, according to Reb Chisda, min b'minai has to be that the thing that is mevatel the thing that is mevatel has to be able to become like the thing that it's being mevatel in order for it to be min b'minai. And Reb Chisda, Reb Chanina holds the opposite. The thing that's going to be batel has to be able to become like, has to be able to convert into the thing that's being mevatel in order to say that min b'minai is batel. It's an added condition to say min b'minai is batel. And then that's where we now have the relevance of the machlokes. If the mevatel could become like the dover a bottle, then it's min b'minoi. But if it cannot, then it's min b'sheni minoi. You look at if the thing that became bottle, if it could become like the thing that's been mevatlet, then it's min b'minoi. But if not, no. So it's not the only condition; it's an added condition. Of course, it has to be min b'minoi as well. It has to be b'basar b'basar. But in order for it to be min b'minoi, it has to be more similar than just physically similar. It has to be that halachically they could also convert one to the other. Tanan b'lord, shtei menachos shalei nikbetzu. So now let's see our Mishnah and its relevance to this machlokes. Tanan b'lord, shtei menachos shalei nikbetzu. We had two menachos that the claimants had not yet been taken from either one, not from Mincha A, not from Mincha B. V'nis'arvu zu b'zu. And Mincha A and Mincha B got mixed together. What did our Mishnah say? If they're not totally mixed together, but there's enough that we know is distinctly from Mincha A, and there's some that's distinctly from Mincha B, im yochel likmish mizu b'fnei atzmo, u'mizu b'fnei atzmo, ksheres v'mlav psulos. Right, that was what our Mishnah said. Frag the Gemara, and that you want to know why that's a chiddush, now you're going to see. Frag the Gemara, v'ahacha, even the comments from Mechada, you're not taking the kmitza from A and B simultaneously. You'll first take the kmitza from A, then you'll take the kmitza from B. Well, the moment you take the kmitza from A, then the remaining part of A, either chavarei shirayim, v'loi kamavatli shirayim l'tivla, and the shirayim will not be able to be mevatel the tevel of the other one. Right, that's what the Mishnah is saying. Because if the shirayim of the first mincha would be mevatel the tevel of the second mincha, well, then you couldn't possibly make a kmitza, and only the first will be possible. But from the fact that the Mishnah says you could take the first kmitza and then take the second kmitza, the shirayim of the first mincha will not be mevatel the remaining tevel of the other mincha. Well, now let's analyze who this fits in according to. Mani, if the Mishnah we just learned on Chav Gimel Amar Aleph is going to the Rabbanan, ha'amri oilin hu de mevatli hadadi, hamin b'minai bottle. In fact, according to the Rabbanan, it wouldn't work. Once you took one kmitza, it's going to be bottle. The second mincha will be bottle. So that our Mishnah cannot be going according to the Rabbanan. It's partial that the Mishnah in Chav Gimel Amar Aleph is only according to Rabbi Yehuda, who has min b'minai bottle, and that's why both menachos remain intact, and you could make the second kmitza. Fact Gemara, b'shlom l'man damar basar batel as linon, b'shlom if you hold like Rabbi Chanina. So you're going to look at the tevel, you're going to look at the mincha B, because our concern is that the shirayim of A will be mevatel mincha B. So what do you look at? You look at mincha B. Basar batel as linon, batel havakim batel. The tevel can one day become just like the shirayim. The lechi kametz meidach havelu shirayim. So the tevel can convert to shirayim. So therefore it's min b'minai, which explains why, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it won't be batel, and then you could take the second kmitza. But if you're going according to Rabbi Chisda, and you look at the shirayim will never be able to become tevel. Shirayim mika tivla, so therefore it's min b'sheinei minai. And if it's min b'sheinei minai, then in fact, it should be batel. How could you make the second kmitza? It's mashma that the Mishnah on Amar Aleph wouldn't be able to fit in according to Reb Chia. Yeah, it would, no problem. You know why? Because there's a new halacha we want to teach you. Hasam Kid Reb Zera. We have the chiddush of Reb Zera. The Reb Zera, Nemar Haktorah b'Kaimitz. The Torah uses a lashon of Haktorah in reference to the Kaimitz. V'nemar Haktorah b'Shirayim. As we learned in Rashi, the Mishnah, it says, L'saktiru mimenu isha Lashem, and with Dashi that's going on the Shirayim. And it's using a lashon Haktorah to describe Haktorah Shirayim. Yes, the Torah says that's also to do, but we're still using a lashon Haktorah of the Shirayim. So I could say they're similar. Mahak Torah, Hamura b'Koimitz, Eina Koimitz, Mevatlas Chaver. Just like the Haktorah mentioned in reference to the komitz, we know one komitz will not be mevatel the other komitz. And how do we know one komitz will not be mevatel the other komitz? Rashi says, the afilu Rabbi Yehuda made it. For the Rabbanan for sure hold, oilin are not mevatel oilin. But even Rabbi Yehuda holds that a komitz wouldn't be mevatel a komitz. The lepog Rabbi Yehuda b'masnisin on this Arab kumtzah becomes chavata. Rabbi Yehuda was made it. That if one komitz got mixed in with another komitz, you could be marked in them both. He only argues in the second case. So therefore, Avaktor Amur b'Shirayim ein Shirayim mevatel komitz. There's a special exeris akosef that even though min b'she'ena mina is batel, but Shirayim will never be mevatel the other mincha. Tashma, let's look at the next case of the same Mishnah, Chav Gimel Amar Aleph. HaKomitz shenis Arab b'mincha shaloi nikmatza. You have a komitz that got mixed in with tevel. Lo yakter. You should not be makter, because you can't be makter the whole thing. Although the komitz part, you want to be makter, but you shouldn't, because you're not allowed to be makter the other part that the komitza had not yet been taken from. Vim hikter, if you wrongfully were makter the whole thing, zusha nikmatza also labaylam, the one that was already nikmatz, and its komitz is there in this container, will be over about it. Its komitza was brought in the mizbeach. And the other mincha, lo also labaylam, because you never did a komitza on it. Frank the Gemara, we don't say that the tevel, which is for sure a lot more than the komitz, that's a full mincha, versus only a small komitza, we don't say that the tevel was mevatel the komitz. Who holds that it's not going to be mevatel? Mani. So the tevel would be mevatel the komitz. So it definitely doesn't fit in according to the Rabbanan. It must be, again, our Mishnah is going according to Rabbi Yehuda, and then we can ask the same question, but on the opposite fashion. If you hold like Rabbi Chisda, did you go to the mevatel, meaning you look at whether or not the tevel can become komitz? It can be. Mevatel habekabatel. The chol porta chazi lemikmatz minei v'avarei min uminai. Every part of the mincha of tevel you could make a kmitza on. So it's possible that the tevel will become just like the kmitza. So therefore, it's min b'minai and it will be lebatel. That will be perfect. You go out, you look at the komitz. The komitz will never be able to become tevel. So it's min b'shenim minai. So it should be batel. Komitz mi kahav tivla lema v'lo krabchiyah. I have the same answer as before. Hanami Reb Zera said the same thing, that the komitz and the shirayim will never ever be mevatel each other. And the mitchaletz tevel, to Rashi, really is tevel and komitz mixed together. Tashma, we're going to now look at the third case of the Mishnah. Nis'ar kumtza b'shirayim. The komitz got mixed in to shirayim shel chaverta. Lo yaktir, you shouldn't be maktir because you're not allowed to be maktir shirayim on the mizbeach. V'm hiktir also labaylam. Over here, if you look at the komitz compared to shirayim, it's shver according to everybody, because the komitz can never become shirayim and the shirayim can never become komitz. So now it's a sign of Chisda, sign of Chanina. V'hochat they'll have a mevatel kibatel and they'll have a batel kibatel. It's both ways. If you look at the sheet that sticks it in. It's mamish any measure, and you see the shirayim is not mevatel l'chomitz. Mani Rabbanan, the same shtickle. According to Rabbanan, anyway the Mishnah is not according to Rabbanan. They hold that min b'minei bot, but according to they hold never are mevatel. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's going to be shver because min Moshe how you learn this is min b'shedim minai. So the same teretz. Amar Abzera, Nemar Aktor b'komitz, v'Nemar Aktor b'shirayim, Ma Aktor Amir b'komitz, Ein HaKomitz mevatel l'schaverei, Av Aktor Amir b'shirayim, Ein Shirayim mevatel l'schakomitz. So that's why it's not sure, because yes, we have the rule about Rabbi Yehuda, when min b'minai is considered min b'minai, either the batel cannot become like the mevatel, or the mevatel cannot become like the batel, but all those rules are suspended when it comes to the Korban Mincha, because by the Korban Mincha, no part of the Mincha, the Shirayim, the Koimitz, the Teva will ever be mevatel anything else. Tashma, Tivla biktzach. What if you mixed into your matzah for Pesach, you mixed in spices? Kitzach could be kimmel. It's I don't know, how does the art call such a thing? It's a spice. Put a lot of it in. What? Okay. Or with shumshamin, or with poppy seeds, or with chol mini tavlin, or any other type of spice, kshera. Matzah, it is matzah, el shenikras matzah mituvelas. It's seasoned matzah, but it's matzah, and it'll be yotze the mitzvah of matzah. Because the havamina is that even if you put in so many spices, that it's more spice than matzah. Because the avish lo tavlin tfemi matzah. So we have the same kind now. Bishlam yaman damar basar batel aslinon. Bishlam akodjem chanina batel have kimivatel. The matzah which we would make, which would be bottled in the spices, is min b'minai with the spices. Why? The lechima amsha have like a tavlin. When it gets totally rotted, it'll be just like the spices. In other words, just like spices, you cannot be yotze the mitzvah achilas matzah by eating them. So too, matzah is completely rotten, you can't be yotze. So therefore, it'll become min b'minai. Therefore, it's not bottled. Elaman the b'basa mevatel aslinon tavlin. Mika have a matzah. The tavlin which are mevatel the matzah can never become matzah. So it's min b'shena minai. So if it's min b'shena minai, how could you be yotze eating matzah with such matzah? It's not speaking where it's mostly tavlin and a little bit of matzah. It's mostly matzah and a little bit of tavlin. Druba matzi, v'lo botlan, it's not bottle. Well, you're not supposed to. The question is, would you be yotze? Because it's not lachmoini, I guess. But you would be yotze. Bekanami, and now I can prove to you that that's correct. The katani matzah, what did the Brasha conclude? It's matzah, ela shenikras matzah metuvelas. Shemamina that was the case, that it was rave matzah and it was miot tavlin, and therefore the matzah is not built. Kisok of Kahana, when Kahana went up to Yisrael, Ashkechinu levnei Rabbi the Yasi v'Karmi. He met the children of Rabbi that were sitting and saying the following: Yisar shecholkai. You have a mincha is Yisar and soilus, but you separate it. You had one container, and in the container there were two little piles of flour. Each of them was a half a Yisar. It's in one keli. The keep the bisa, which is the keli, klisharis, that you would put a mincha in. The nugget full yain be'echad behen, and the full yain touched one side, which now makes it pasul. What would the halacha be? Is the other side pasul as well? Ki tanan kli mitzaref masha v'zeichel l'chaydish. That we said that a klisharis is mitzaref everything that's inside it. When it comes to kachim, hanamili hechi the nagli badadi. Maybe that's only when the two piles are touching each other. Aval hechi the nagli badadi loy a double. Or maybe no, if it's two things, even though they're not touching each other, but they're in the same keli, it's one. Amalu, he answered, mitnan kli mechaber. Kli mechaber means if they're touching, it makes it as one. Kli mitzaref tnan kol duhu. Even though they're not touching at all, if they're in the same keli, they are both considered one, and we look at it as if the tumah touched everything. Okay, we'll stop here. Finally, I came on time.